John. Last night, I didn't get a chance to message any of you, and that's kind of a pity because I was thinking of everyone, and it was a very auspicious day, obviously. It was Akshaya Trititya. It's actually an especially auspicious day for reasons that we'll get into in a few moments. But I want to talk also about Matangi because Akshaya Trititya is also Matangī Jayanti, among other things. And so before we begin our postural practice today, of course, we'll do some Hatha Yoga. This Hatha Yoga class, after all, we'll do some Hatha Yoga. But before that, I just want to go over some things about Matangi and about her worship, just in case some of you might be interested in doing Matangi Puja. Now, tomorrow, Thursday night, we have our Puja class. So there I want to look at an actual Padati for Matangi, a fuller worship of Matangi that's just focused on Chandalini Devi entirely. So tomorrow we'll have a more extended conversation about how to worship Matangi at our Thursday evening puja class. But today I just want to offer a very simple worship that appears in our Kali Puja. Towards the end of the Kali Puja, there's a worship of Matangini, and I'll look at the Dhyana mantra and then also the offering mantra as well as the food offering mantra. All these mantras are so exquisite and they're full of profound like kaula meanings and whatnot. So I want to explore them a little bit. But before that, let's just chant the mantra together. So by the way, let me show you something. If you go on the Patreon, there's a collection entirely devoted to Mahavidyas. So if you click into collections, let me just show it to you on the screen before we begin. If you click here into like collections, I just want you to know that it's here. You'll see there's oh my god, where is it? Oh, you'll see a playlist over here. It's got a picture of Ma Tara on it, and it says Dasha Mahavidya. So Matangi, as you know, is a Mahavidya. She's one of the 10 forms of Kali. Now, some of these are like linked to YouTube, so I still have to work on that. But there's this video called Matangi and the Mahavidyas. So I'm gonna go back into this playlist and try to make sure those videos that were linked to YouTube and that are no longer available because of the YouTube ban, I'm gonna go and make sure that they're all back. But if you find a video like this, it says Matangi and the Mahavidyas, and you like want to listen to it, even if it's not on the Patreon, if you just like type in onto the podcast this same title, it should be available also in podcast form. So we already did a talk last year on Matangi and the Mahavidyas. And here we give a talk on who Matangi is and how she fits into the broader scheme of Shakta worship. And we gave this talk on Akshaya Trititya. I think either last year or the year before last year. I can't remember. So that's there. But there's a lot of stuff. There's like Kali and Chinnamasta and Dhumavati. There are two lectures on Dhumavati, on Matara, and all this other stuff. Just give me a few moments. I'm gonna work on getting that back up. I just want you to know this collection is there and that we have been talking about Matangi together for quite a few years now, but we're zeroing in on what it actually means to worship her. So I'm not going to say anything about theory, or I'm not going to talk about any of the foundation myths for Matangi that we find in texts like the Mahabharata Purana or the Pranatoshini Tantra or anything like that. Let's just go straight into the worship. Let's go directly into the mantras of her worship, starting with her Dhyana mantra. So taking you to the Zoom now, sorry, no, taking you to the Discord now, you'll see over here today's post. It explores the worship of Matangi, and I just want to zero in on this section right here, this mantra for Matangini. This is a dhyana mantra for Matangini. So I'm going to chant it now. You can chant it along with me, and then we'll slowly, word by word, unpack it. So as you know, the dhyana mantra is there to help you visualize Matangi in order to be able to connect to her in the presence of your heart. So before a deity is worshipped externally, she's first worshipped internally. She's first invoked into the heart and then felt as the essence of your own being before she is then projected outwards, evoked as it were, into the image or into the altar for Bahir Puja, for external worship. So let's start with the invocation of Mātangī Mā by meditating upon her form as prescribed by this beautiful mantra from our Padati. So it goes like this. Shavopari samashinam raktāmbara parichadam raktalankara samyuktam gunjahara vibhushitam shodashabdam cha yuvatim pinonata payodharam kapala kartrika hastam paramajyoti rupinim vama dakshina yogena dhyayen mantra viduttamam Ishatasya samayuktam Nilamegha samaprabham Nilamegha samaprabham. Om, the highest knower of the mantra, should meditate on this goddess through the yoga or through the union of the left and right as follows. Seated on a corpse, dressed in red, adorned with red ornaments, garlanded in poisonous flowers, or the seeds of poisonous flowers. She is a young woman of 16 with comely breasts, holding a sword and a skull bowl, whose form is the supreme light of consciousness. Endowed with a subtle smile, she is radiant like a storm cloud. So one of the many dhyana mantras to Matangini. And it's such a subtle and simple and beautiful dhyana mantra. It's quite short, actually. Some dhyana mantras can be quite extensive, but they're generally quite short. So let's go over this one word by word. It's so exquisite. And the first claim here is that she's seated on a corpse. Shava upari. So she's on top of a corpse. Now, as you know, this is a very important sadhana in the Kaula world, or in the culture of the cremation ground dwelling Shaiva ascetics. So here, seated on a corpse, a person is to perform sadhana, whether it's the worship of some deity or whether it's the repetition of that deity's mantra. Usually the sadhana is empowered by doing it on top of a corpse. And there are certain specifications for the corpse. So the corpse itself must be worshipped, must be established, and there are a lot of protections that you need in order for the corpse not to revolt. So if those protections are not carried out, the corpse can become possessed and can attack you. So all of that. And as we know, Ram Prasad might have done Shava Sadhana. Obviously, these days, it's hard to have a corpse handy. So we often say in our tradition that this body itself is the corpse. So when we do sadhana, we are seated on the corpse that is this body, which is nothing but a river of dissolution heading into the entropy of the universe. So it's like we're sitting on the crown chakra, seated on this body, which itself is the corpse, Shava Shiva. But anyway, this image of a goddess seated on a corpse is very tantric, like Kali stands on the chest of her husband Shiva in the form of a corpse. That's the ultimate image of Tantra, Kali standing on top of Shiva. But of course, the other Mahavidyas are also similarly seated or standing on top of corpses. So Tara is standing on a corpse, like that. Chinnamasta, interestingly, is standing on lovers. But they're always mounted on top of something, and usually it's a corpse, like Matangī, but also Lalita Tripura Sundari. They're all seated on corpses, and the practitioner who worships these corpse-seated deities usually is also seated on a corpse in order to achieve an identity. So Shava sadhana is a very important part of the Kaula Marga sort of left-hand tantric world, but Shavasana itself is a seat that we find that we find the deities taking. So she is no exception. She's seated on a corpse, Shava Upari, and she's in the smashan. Samashinam, here this means the cremation ground. So seated on top of a corpse in the cremation ground, she is covered in red clothes. Ambara means clothes. Rakta Ambara. Parichadam means covered. So in other words, veiled. She's veiled in red clothes. Now, there's a metaphor here. Red represents rajas. So all the dynamic movement in the universe, all the names and forms that arise in consciousness, that play around in consciousness, and that dissolve in consciousness, they're rajasic, in that they're dynamic. And because of all these thoughts and words and movements, we don't glimpse that silence, that serene, peaceful, quiescent consciousness within. So in a sense, the rajas, the dynamism of the goddess, veils her formless, pure consciousness aspect. The more distracted the mind is, the less we touch down, as it were, in non-dual awareness. The less we feel our spacious presence as pure being in and of itself. So in a sense, this parichadam, this covering, could be like actually a veiling, that she hides herself by means of her dynamism. But here, in a more tantric sense, she adorns herself by means of her dynamism. So here, the dynamism is not necessarily a veil. It's a fashion statement. It makes her more beautiful. Consciousness is more beautiful because it is dynamic, because it has the power to project, maintain, and destroy. That is the essence of consciousness. Shiva Svabhavaha. Iti Shaktihi. What is Shakti? She is the essence of Shiva. So Shiva Svabhavaha, Iti Shaktihi. And that Shakti, what is she? She is dynamism. She is Kartritva, the agency of Lord Shiva to create, maintain, and dissolve. So here you can read it in two ways. She is the goddess seated atop the corpse in the cremation ground, covered in red clothes, the way consciousness is veiled by the dynamism of mind, speech, and world. Or she is the goddess seated atop the corpse, consciousness which is made beautiful, which is adorned by the red clothes of dynamism. But of course, very literally, red is what the goddess tends to like to wear. Red represents blood and power and dynamism, but it's also what a tantric adept will wear. So tantrics, they tend to wear red. Especially Shakta tantrics. Black and red, usually these are the colors that you tend to see them wear. So here, she's a goddess seated on top of a corpse, but she's dressed in red the way a tantric practitioner might be in the cremation ground, who is herself seated on a corpse. So here, the line between goddess and goddess worshipper is blurred. And we saw this also in the Bhairavi Jayanti class. We were looking at a dhyana mantra for Bhairavi, and we saw that she's holding a rosary, she's dressed in red clothes. She's essentially a tantric practitioner. A euhemerized tantric practitioner. She's like, if we were to deify the stereotypical female tantrika, this is what it would look like. Seated on a corpse in the cremation ground, covered in red clothes. So like that, you can see like very much like Bhairavi. She's dressed in red. Rakta alankara. So alankara means jewelry or ornament. Rakta means red. So she's adorned with red ornaments or rubies or something like that. I heard that in the Shankara Mattas in Sringeri. Tomorrow is Shankara's birthday, by the way. Shankara Jayanti. I'm very excited. But Shankara Mattas, especially the one in Sringeri, they worship the Sri Chakra. And in Sringeri, I haven't seen it, but I've heard there's a Sri Chakra made entirely of rubies. One of the disciples of that Shankaracharya told me that it's made of rubies. And how beautiful to think of a Sri Chakra, but glistening with rubies on every point, kind of like Indrajala, the net of Indra, something like that. So we can imagine she's bejeweled in red ornament. This to me might be a reference to Indrajala, the magical spell of Indra by which he bewitches the universe. We've been talking about that in our Vijnana Bhairava Tantra class, because in verse 100 or 102, Vijnana Bhairava describes his entire world, Shiva describes his entire world as Indrajala, a magical display of phenomena, like a beautiful painting or something like that. So this gives me that sense that she is covered in red clothes, adorned with red clothes, and she's like Indrajala, the glistening magic of this universe, studded with rubies, if you will. Samyukta means adjoining, so she's adorned. She's adorned by red jewels. This is one of my favorite lines. Gunja hara vibhushitam. She is garlanded in poisonous flowers. Shiva is very fond of the datura because he can distill it and make a kind of intoxicant from it. If we eat it, we usually die, but if he takes it, he gets high. So whether you die or whether you get high, the difference is whether you're a jiva or whether you're Shiva. The things that would kill a jiva nourish Shiva. And notice, that's true of Kaula Marga Tantra. The things that would kill your spirituality in any other context is fuel for the Kaula Margan. That's why it's not an easy kind of sadhana. Because these things that we use in the sadhana, that we practice as part of the puja, can be spiritually deleterious. These powerful sense enjoyments, these polluting substances, they're obviously spiritually compromising to a certain kind of practitioner. But to another kind of practitioner, they can be very spiritually helpful. So here, Gunja Hara means poison, but she's adorned in poisonous flowers. Or really, usually it's the seeds. So the seeds of these flowers, which are a kind of folk village flower, but a poisonous flower, the Gunjahara flower. The seeds are used to make a kind of mala. So she's adorned in a mala of poisonous seeds. But I prefer to think of her as adorned with the garland of poisonous flowers. It adds to her mystique and to her championing of the transgressive elements of life and to the alchemization of things that would otherwise be poison, turning our weaknesses into strengths, if you will, our vices into virtues. The ultimate reversal of Tantra, to see that which is impure, as God herself. Now, this is next phrase is very packed with esoteric meaning. Shodha Shabdam cha yuvatim. She's a young woman, but she's a young woman of 16. So, in a literal sense, in Indian aesthetics, a woman is considered to be most beautiful when she's 16. This is the Indian idea of like the ancient classical idea of like when a woman comes into age. So, before that, she's not of age and she's not seen sexually as an attractive woman. But then once she's 16, she comes into her womanhood, if you will, and then now she's a viable mate, a spouse. And so we look upon her as the epitome of beauty. The most attractive kind of woman is a 16-year-old woman. That is an ancient idea in Indian aesthetics. So when we say the goddess is 16, essentially it's a phrase for she is a young woman and exceedingly beautiful. But there's a deep symbology to this idea of 16. The moon has 15 days when it's waxing and 15 days when it's waning. So the moon cycle is like a 30-day cycle of 15 here and 15 there. So the 16th kala, meaning the 16th day of the moon, refers to the eternal reality, the atemporal ground in which the 15 come and in which the 15 go. So Kali is usually described as the 16th because she is the eternal Kala, the Nitya Kala, if you will. So she is time itself. She's not the things that move within time. So she's 16 years old because she represents the whole moon cycle, but she also represents that which is beyond the moon cycle as the reality and substratum of that moon cycle. Cool idea, huh? So she's 16 years old because she's young and beautiful, but she's 16 years old because she's the moon cycle also, an eternal time. Pinonata Payodharam, she has full and comely breasts. So this whole line describes her as a beautiful young woman with full breasts, but of course the symbolism here is that she's the divine mother, she's full of life, she's exceedingly attractive, and of course this brings to mind also erotic imagery as well. So here you see a kind of tension between the gentle and the fierce, but also a tension between the pure and the impure, between the transcendent and the erotic. So this is very Kaula Marga idea. Then this is where you get the ferocity. Kapala Kartrika Hastam. In her hands, she's holding a kapala, a skull bowl, which is a very important device for the cremation ground dwelling tantric, because this is how you primarily offer things, but it's also how you yourself consume things. So this is the emblem of the tantric, if you will, this the smashan dwelling tantric, this skull bowl, but also she has a sword. So she's got two hands. In her two hands, she holds a skull and a sword. And this is where we get a deep philosophical insight. And she is of the form pure consciousness. Parama Jyoti Rupini. Now, here, I'm very interested in this line over here. There's something very profound here. It says, Vama Dakshina Yogena. Yogena, by means of the union. Yoga means union. So Yogena, by means of the union of the left and of the right, she should be meditated upon by the tantric adept. Dhyayen, one should meditate upon. Mantra vid means one who knows the mantra, but uttama means the supreme knower of the mantra, or the accomplished knower of the mantra, the best knower of the mantra. And the person who knows the mantra, arguably, is a person who has received diksha in one sense. But it's also a person who is an adept. So the word uttamam here refers to a tantric adept. A tantric is someone who knows the mantra by virtue of diksha. And here it's a knower of the mantra par excellence. So the knower of the mantra par excellence, I translated this as the highest knower of the mantra, but upon reflection, I think tantric adept might be a cleaner translation. So the tantric adept should meditate on this goddess through the union of the left and right. Now, what on earth does that mean? That's a profound idea too, because we know that Vama has the connotation of Vamangi or Vamakshi, which means Vama Marga, left-hand path, the path devoted to the goddess, which is typically a non-dual transgressive practice devoted towards some kind of cremation ground dwelling, Gora Rupa of Ma, fierce aspect of Ma. So Vama Marga refers to the left-hand path of Tantra, but Dakshina Marga refers to the right-hand path of Tantra, which over the past few weeks I've been arguing are like the foundational things in the Tantric world. Shaiva Siddhanta, like Vedic sensibility, all of those things are required for success in spiritual life. What to say for success in Tantra? So we want to be like one or the other often. We want to be a right hand path practitioner and we don't want to go anywhere near the left. Or we fetishize all the left hand path practices and we sneer and look down upon right hand path practices as being somewhat limited in their worldview. After all, we're non-dualist, everything is pure to us, whereas they have this idea of pure and impure, mala and amala, so we're better. So like this, we tend to fight. It's like as if one hand is wrestling the other. It's like they're trying to like fight each other. But we have two hands. The reality is a full spectrum. In the beginning of Durga Puja, Vedic mantras. At the end of Durga Puja, muttering obscenities as you take the Kalasham to the river for immersion. The whole spectrum of life is captured by this spiritual tradition, and therefore, the union of the left and right, in one sense, could mean the mastery of both the right hand path and the left hand path of Tantra, which would be required to be a tantric adept. So that's why I think the word mantra vid uttamam, the supreme knower of the mantra here, makes sense, because only such a person would be able to reconcile the left and the right, the pure and the impure, as Sri Ramakrishna himself did. My guru once joked, he said, there was Sri Ramakrishna practiced right hand, left hand, this hand, that hand. There was no hand that Sri Ramakrishna did not practice. He had mastered the whole of Tantra, and therefore he's a mantra vid uttama. The tantric adept, by uniting the left and the right, should worship the goddess in this way. But also, this obviously has a reference to the Ida and Pingala nadis. So Ida is the left hand channel, and Dakshina, meaning right, is the right hand channel, Pingala. So Ida and Pingala are the two energies, efferent and afferent, or afferent and efferent, if you will, and their union is in the Shushumna nadi. This makes sense because Parama Jyoti Rupini means consciousness, and consciousness is often understood as that which dwells in the center of your being, the essence of who you are, which is in the Shushumna Nadi. I once asked some Vamacharis, we were sitting in a circle of these Bhairavas in Manikarnika Ghat, and I asked the Guru there, what is purity? And he got very excited. He said, it's a really great question. Because he said, if you don't understand this, we'd just be perverts to you. Something, he used that word. And I was like, what then is purity? Obviously all of these substances that are used in Kaula Marga are impure by Vedic standards. What do you then define as pure? And he said, he got very excited. He's like, that's a really good question. And then he just became a little abstracted and said, residing in the Shushumna Nadi alone is purity. He said it's Shushumna Nadi. He defined purity as Shushumna Nadi, meaning consciousness. And that means whatever is done in consciousness is pure, meaning anything that is seen as God through and through is pure. It's the vision of God in all things that alone constitutes purity. And as Abhinavagupta points out, it's seeing duality and seeing pure and impure that alone constitutes impurity. Anyway, so this idea of Paramajyoti Rupinim, consciousness, it goes very nicely with this idea of the union of Ida and Pingala in the Shushumna Nadi. Here it says that she's smiling very slightly. She's adorned, Sama Yuktam, she's made beautiful with a subtle smile, like the smile of the Buddha or somebody like that. Just a sweet, subtle, inward smile, a mysterious smile almost. She's smiling mysteriously. Nila Mega Samaprabham, and she's radiant like a storm cloud, like a splendorous storm cloud. So putting this all together, then, this line I've led with the tantric adept, having united the left and right paths in the central column, should meditate on the goddess in the following way. Seated on a corpse, dressed in red, adorned with red ornaments, garlanded in poisonous flowers, she is a young woman of 16 with comely breasts, holding a sword and a skull bowl in her hands, who is of the forms, the supreme light of consciousness, endowed with a subtle smile, radiant like a storm cloud. Oh my God, there's so much to just that, right? I mean, it's just so nice to just sit with that meditation and contemplate the meaning of the words and to meditate on mine and connect with her as an image in the heart. To feel her living presence. It's so wonderful. Okay, now once we've done that, once we've meditated upon her, we can do a mental worship. So in your mind, you can worship her with whatever you want. But typically, this worship is done using transgressive substances, but more importantly, polluted substances that have already been tasted. So typically, what we offer Matangi are things that have already been offered to other deities. That's why in our Kali Puja, it makes sense to do Matangi last. Her worship is at the very end of the puja, even after the homa. Because having done all this stuff, you now have a lot of leftovers. You have leftover flowers, you have leftover incense, presumably, you have leftover fire, you have all sorts of leftover things, and a lot of leftover food as well from the Naivedyam, the food offerings you've given to like Ganesh and to Shiva and to Surya and to Vishnu and to Lakshmi and to Saraswati, like everyone else that you worship, including Kali and Bhairava, they've already partaken of the food that you've offered. So now that food that has already been uchishta, if you will, already been spoiled or touched, that food is to be offered to Matangi. So when you're doing your mental worship, feel like you're giving her things that you yourself have tasted. This year, I wanted to talk about Shabari in the Ramcharitmanas, who is the adopted daughter of a sage named Matanga, and how she relates to Matangi. Because before she gave something to Rama, she first tasted it, which is unthinkable. It's unthinkable to offer something to God that you yourself first have enjoyed. But here, the reason she tasted it is because she wanted to make sure the fruit was sweet for Rama. She didn't want to give Rama a sour fruit. So she tasted it first and then gave it to Rama, to the shock and surprise of everyone, but to the utter delight of Sri Rama. Because that's true bhakti, real love. Real love has no formality, no idea of propriety even. So here, when you worship Matangi, we should have no idea of propriety. So I was sad that yesterday we didn't get to talk about Matangi together, that we didn't get to do anything for Matangi. But Sumeroji made a really good point today. He's like, whoa, you guys, we're being really transgressive. Because yesterday was Matangī Jayanti, so it would have been proper to worship her yesterday. But here we are, the day after Matangī Jayanti, worshipping her. So Sumeru saved us. It's a good point. So today you can worship Jayanti. If you didn't do it yesterday, today is a nice day to worship her. It's the wrong day. Yesterday was the day, so that's what makes it the right day. So that's the flavor of Matangi. The wrong thing to offer is the right thing to offer. All the rules of puja, she likes it when you transgress them. So and sometimes, like, say I want to give something to the altar, but then I accidentally, like, say I make a tea in the morning, and the first thing you should do is offer something at the altar before you yourself consume it. But just say I'm distracted and I'm texting on my phone or thinking about something and I make the tea and then I sip it. I'm like, oh my God, I've already sipped the tea. Now what? Well, give it to Matangi. We can still make an offering of it. But anyway, typically in the puja, what we give to Matangi are the things that are already consumed, not by ourselves, but by the other deities, if you will. So here's a mantra. Oh, you know what? I have the Padati. I don't know why I was looking at that. Here's the Padati itself. So if you go to the Kali Puja Padati, here's the Padati. It's called the worship of Uchista Chandalini. So if you go to the table of contents here in the Padati and you scroll all the way down, you'll see it's at the very, very, very end. Like after the Bali Pradhanam, so after the sacrifice, after the worship of Shava Rupa Shiva, after Mahakala Bhairava. It's like the very end. So if you click into Uchishta Chandalini, here it is. Uchishta means spoiled or polluted. Chandala means person who dwells in the cremation ground. Chandalini is the feminine form of that noun. So Chandalini means like an outcast woman or an undertaker who lives in a place of defilement, namely the cremation ground. And so an impure outcast woman, but a young, beautiful, impure outcast woman. That's the bhava of Uchishta Chandalini. So this word just means Matangi or Neela Saraswati. These are various names for the same deity. So Uchishta Chandalini. So here's the mantra which we just went through, translated as follows. Okay, then having done that, oh, I forgot to mention, before you chant the mantra, it's good to draw a mandala. Now, there are many different mandalas for Uchishta, Matangi, or Chandalini, but for us, we just draw a downward pointing red triangle to the uh, upper right side of my mat. So obviously we're facing north when we worship Kali. So just in front and to the right, you can on the floor draw a red triangle. That is the northeast. There are a lot of reasons for this. Abhinava Gupta says that the north is for renunciation, the east is for bhoga. So the northeast is the union of the right and left, if you will. Or you could say the union of yoga and bhoga. So northeast has a specific connotation. So you draw in the northeast, and then you say the mantra. And by the way, it's nice to draw it in red. So you can dip your hands in some water, dip it in the vermilion, which Karameshwari has on the forehead. That same vermilion you use, and you anoint the floor with the downward pointing triangle. That's going to be the mandala which you worship. So the goddess is going to be invoked into that. Obviously, some people have more elaborate mandalas where it's like a hexagram inside a circle, inside an eight-petal lotus, inside a Bhupura, as you can see in Zoe's image there of the Kali yantra inside a Bhupura, like that. So we can worship her in a simple yantra like this or a more complex yantra, but draw the yantra first and then do the meditation. And then having done the meditation, the next thing to do is to place an offered flower with Sanghara Mudra on the downward pointing triangle, and then you sprinkle the flower reciting the following mantra. So Sanghara Mudra looks like this. You take your hands and you flip them, you cross your wrist, flip the palms around and bring the palms together, and then interlace all of your fingers until you have this like James Bond upside down gun or something your fingers are pointing out. And then here's the interesting thing, flip it like this. Yeah, that's it. You guys got it. Side Krameshwari nailed it. So you pick up the flower with your two fingers like this. So you pick up the flower, and then with the flower in the two fingers, you flip the hands around like this, and now you're holding the flower. I like to smell it, but that's just me. I just like to pollute it some more. But you have this, it's an offered flower. It's already prasad. So you have this flower like this, and then upside down, you like put it like that. You like drop the flower on top of the thing. So this is a beautiful mudra. It's often used to like draw energy out of a murti or out of a fire like that. That's why it's called Sanghara mudra, the mudra of destruction. It's very like cleansing. Like you'll notice it just kind of cleans the slate and resets everything. That's the bhava of this uh, mudra. So grabbing the flower like this, whoop, flip it, and then put it on the triangle. Having placed in the triangle, you can sprinkle the flower with your kusha grass or with some other flower. You can sprinkle it with your fingers or whatever, and you say the following mantra. Obviously, there are a lot of bija mantras here, so tantric practice is usually done after diksha. But again, these mantras are only empowered after Diksha. I think even prior to Diksha, if you chant them, you can still get a positive result from it. I don't think the goddess will smite you or anything, because that's just not my relationship to her. After all, she's your own mother. If she smites you, it's for your own good. She can only do you good. You know what I mean? So, with that said, here are some bija mantras. But of course, I'm speaking of this now in an academic context. It'd be nice to receive these in Diksha. It can only help, but otherwise, it's still okay to chant them. Because you're doing this out of sincerity and out of deep love for the Divine Mother. So that anything done in sincerity is always wonderful. But of course, do it out of sincerity, meaning don't try to like gain things. Don't do things out of desire. Don't do things out of fear. If you want something from the Divine Mother, that's not love. I'm offering this in love with the expectation that we are worshiping Mother in love. So my disclaimers, they only work because I assume that you're doing it for pure intentions out of love. Just because you love her and you want to make her happy. But if you're doing it because you want some money or you want her to help you with your exams and give you knowledge and make you beautiful, she does do all of those things. It's just I'm not interested in those things, so I don't know. I don't know if you'll get a bad reaction using mantras that you received outside of Diksha because um maybe that's only true if you want things. But we don't want things. We're just doing it out of love. So therefore nothing bad can happen because Mother herself takes care of us. Just out of sincerity, we're doing it. So if you'd like, here are the mantras. You can chant them to Jeshta Matangini. They can also be used as japa, as a repetition mantra if you want. But this is for the offering of the flower. It goes like this. Aing Hring Kling Song Aing Jeshta Matangi Namami Uchishta Chandalini Trailokya Vashankari Swaha. That's the first part of the mantra. Then here's the offering. Idam Nirmalya Pushpadikam Uchishta Chandalinye Namaha. So if you get rid of this part, here's a mantra. The mantra, one of the various tantric mantras for Matangi, this mantra. But then this part that you add over here is for the offering of the flower, etc. So saying this mantra, it translates as follows: Om Aing Hring Kling Saung Aing. These are the bijas. To the eldest, Jeshta Matangi, I bow. To the fierce, Uchishta Chandalini, the outcast goddess who sanctifies impurity. We just threw that in there. I threw the word fierce, and we threw this line in there just for fun. Who enchants and subjugates the three worlds. Trilokya. Loka means world, so Trilokya means the three worlds of waking, dreaming, deep sleep, or Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha, like that. And Shankari, Vashankari means to subjugate, or to dominate, or to enchant. So she who enchants and subjugates the three worlds. I offer myself with these leftover. I offer myself. I offer. Yeah, I like that. I offer myself along with these leftover flowers and all their fragrance. Swaha. Nirmalya means polluted. Pushpa means flowers. Adi. Adi means etc. So I offered these polluted flowers, etc. All this is offered to you. Oh, Uchishta Chandalini Swaha. So that's this mantra, this offering mantra. Then you can place offered food on the mandala. And here's a mantra for that. Om Leya Choshana Panadi Tambulam Anulepanam Nirmalyam Bhojanam Tubhyam Dadami Shri Shivagyaya. So there are many things I'd like to say about this mantra. I won't right now, just in the interest of time, because it has many elements of the Shiva Lata Mudra, or elements of more sensual and more erotic tantric sadhanas. Because the word tambulam refers to a kind of breath mint that you would use. You know, like it's a leaf, and within the leaf is wrapped some spices, and those spices can be pretty intoxicating. So tambulam can sometimes be stimulating the way a cigarette can be stimulating, or intoxicating the way like Blue Lotus can be intoxicating, like that. It's got a herbal property of intoxication. Anyway, in the mantras of Krishna and Radha, like when we were looking at that Vaishnava Padati some weeks back, you saw that Radha is putting a tambulam in Krishna's mouth. So in that dhyana mantra, she's kind of sensually pushing a tambulam between his lips. So the tambulam has a connotation of like kissing and making love also. It's typically something that you eat after the meal, but it's itself a kind of transgressive substance. You know, yeah, like that. It's like a little menthol ciggy or something. So you eat it. And it's sometimes given between lovers in an act of lovemaking, like all of that. You know how like the American movies, there's that trope where before they kiss, they like pull something out of their pocket and go, you know, or like take a breath mint in the anticipation of the kiss. So tambulam anulepanam refers to not just the tambulam, but also fragrant pastes like sandalwood paste and other unguents that might also be used in such a context. So there's a kind of sensuality to the tambulam and the anulepanam. Then the word leya choshyana panadi means foods that have already been licked and sucked. Licked, essentially. Leya, licked. So anything that's already been licked, and all these fragrant pastes and this tambulam, and also along with nirmalyam bhojanam. Again, impure bhojana means food or the act of eating. So this leftover food, tubhyam, the dative case of to you. So these foods and drinks, as well as the tambulam and other fragrant pastes that have already been touched by the tongue, this leftover sullied food I offer to you. And this is interesting. Dadami, I offer tubhyam to you by Shri Shiva Gyaya, by the command of Lord Shiva. So just so we know we aren't making all of this up or falling into the throes of delusion, becoming ensnared by powerful sense objects in the name of spirituality. It's some hypocritical act of worldliness that we disguise as spirituality. Here there's a little disclaimer: by the command of Lord Shiva. So the only reason we're doing this is because it's there in the Tantras. And as per the Tantras, this is the worship of Uchishta Chandalini that has been prescribed. So by the command of Shiva here refers to the source of this sadhana, which is the Agama, Tantra, with the direct revelation of Lord Shiva. So Lord Shiva in a Tantra told us to do it this way, and that's why we're doing it this way. So it's almost like a kind of forgiveness mantra. It's like all of this is unthinkable. The fact that I offered you all of these sensual, polluted substances, the fact that I've broken every rule, it's so unthinkable, and it might go against my ethos as a pujari or as a Brahmin or something. So I add this last thing. but I have the sanction of Lord Shiva. Shri Shivagyaya, by the command of Lord Shiva alone, I've done all of this. Which also means, may thy will alone be done. May this action be done purely for the sake of worship, purely for Lord Shiva, and not for me. So it removes yourself from the equation a little bit by just making Shiva the author. Didn't work at Nuremberg, I know, but maybe it'll work here. The generals made me do it. It's kind of like Lord Shiva told me to do it, so I did. And you take it up with him. If you have a problem with this puja, take it up with Shiva in the agamas. Don't take it up with me. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just doing what I've told. So, having said that, the Shri Shiva Gyaya line is beautiful because it refers to the source of all of this, namely the agamas, but it also acts as a kind of forgiveness mantra, like in the way that karmana manasa vacha tvato nanya gatir mama might, like may all these actions, may all these words, may all these thoughts be an offering to you. Viranata, yeah. The Shiva made me do it. So anyway, having said all of that, this is a very simple puja that you can do right away for the worship of Matangi, and we tend to do it every day. So every day at the end of the Kali Puja, we do this little Matangi worship towards the end, just by meditating on a mantra, meditating on a form, and then saying that flower offering mantra, and then saying that food offering mantra. We just set aside a little food and a little bit of flowers for Uchishta Chandalini, and that's enough. She's also, remember, Neela Saraswati, so anytime you're learning anything, it's by her grace alone that you can learn it. So because Saraswati is the deity of all learning, both secular and spiritual, you could say Neela Saraswati is a specialized form of Saraswati that specifically governs tantric knowledge. Not necessarily. She governs all knowledge. Remember, these are not many deities in a pantheon. They're all forms of the same deity. So Neela Saraswati is not like, it's not categorically different from Saraswati. What Saraswati rules, Neela Saraswati rules also. There's only one Ma. But that being said, the Neela Saraswati form, blue or black or green Saraswati, she has the connotation of tantric knowledge holder. So she teaches the tantra. So those of us who are interested in learning tantras, it's by her grace alone that we can encounter primary sources. By her grace alone that we can understand the Sanskrit and that we can meaningfully integrate their teachings in order that we may practice spirituality meaningfully. So may this be an offering to Uchishta Chandalini, who is the embodiment of all learning and tantric wisdom, who is the embodiment of Advaita, who has transcended duality by going beyond all the pure and impure, to that beautiful outcast woman who sanctifies the taboo. May this be so many Gunjahara flowers, so many poisonous flowers placed at her lotus feet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Matangini Devi ki Jai. Jai Ma Chandalini. Jai Ma Matangi. Jai Maha. Okay, so now let's practice some Hatha Yoga, shall we? Anyway, I'm just gonna turn off the